I just thought I would get back up with you. I got a message from someone and I thought I needed to clarify some stuff with them. So I'm going to read the message. It was regarding my last video, and this person says, an 11-year-old with diabetes is likely a type 1. That is hardly comparable to gestational diabetes and your grandmother's diabetes. Very poor advice. I did not give advice. I was telling you how family show up with diabetes. I showed up with diabetes when I was 11. No one else in my family had diabetes at that time. My grandmother, at the time I was 11, was 66. She showed up 12 years later with diabetes. Now, back in my day, which back in the 50s, the designations for diabetics were if you were under the age of 45, you were a type 1 diabetic, and more than likely you were on insulin. You could not control it with diet, and they didn't have things like metformin and stuff like that at that time. When my grandmother showed up 12 years later with diabetes, they still didn't have metformin, and she controlled hers mostly with diet because she was considered a senile diabetic because she was over the age of 65. If you were between 45 and 65, you were an adult onset diabetic, and usually they controlled it with some insulin and diet, and they had you lose weight, especially if you were overweight. Now, even now, they want you to lose weight if you're overweight. But this person didn't actually listen to what I was saying. I showed up with diabetes when I was 11. 12 years later, my grandmother showed up with diabetes, totally different kind. Hers was senile diabetes, and they attributed it to the fact that you got old and your parts were wearing out, and that was how they usually figured you got senile diabetes. However, that tells you genetically the diabetes started with my grandmother because she passed the gene on for diabetes. Now, my older sister didn't show up with diabetes until 26 years later, after she'd had her fourth child. And during her pregnancy with the fourth child, she had gestational diabetes. But the precedent was already there genetically for her to develop diabetes because the gene was passed to her as well as to me. Now, most times, and you have to take into consideration that for 50 years I have taught diabetic classes, and for 50 years I have gathered information, and just the information that I have gathered, 9 times out of 10, someone who has gestational diabetes will end up a diabetic within 3 to 5 years after having had the baby, and the gestational diabetes goes away. It's just something I've observed. I've known several people that have had children that had gestational diabetes, and within 5 years they've been a diabetic. So that's just something, an FYI. It's not, as far as I know, a proven fact or anything. It's just something I have observed. Now, the designations when I was diagnosed with diabetic, there were 4. You were a juvenile diabetic, and you were diagnosed a juvenile diabetic up until the age of 45. From 45 to 65, you were an adult onset diabetic, and after the age of 65, you were a senile diabetic. The only other diabetic they had was a gestational diabetic. So gestational has been there as long as the other three. Now I understand there are 7 different designations for diabetics. And like my juvenile diabetes is now classified as an autoimmune diabetic. I am autoimmune. I have 5 different autoimmune diseases that goes along with it. My immune system is all messed up. It just is a fact of life. So, it's just kind of different strokes for different folks, I guess. The designation for a diabetic, your blood sugar, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, your blood sugar normals were 90 to 110. About 6 to 8 months before metformin came out, all of a sudden the parameters for a diabetic, your blood sugar dropped from 70 to 90 was normal. Now, like I said, I've been a diabetic 68 years, and I've been teaching diabetic classes for a long time, and I don't know of any diabetic who functions with half a brain when their sugar is 70, and it sure don't work much better if your sugar's 90. I think that the biggest reason the parameters for what a normal blood sugar was changed is because they wanted to sell lots of metformin, and they sure have done that, haven't they? Now, when I was diagnosed a diabetic, they had beef and pork insulins. If you had allergies to either of those, they had fish insulin. A bottle of insulin cost me $10.95. My grandmother would send me to the pharmacy with $11. I got to keep the nickel. Now, a bottle of insulin now, if you get regular insulin, that's recombinant DNA, which is a manufactured one, which I have no problem with because that's what I use, it costs $200 and some. If you get the generic, which is Lysipro, then it's $100 and some. When they told me I was diabetic at the age of 11, they told me, the doctors did, within 5 years we'll have this cured. Well, it's been 68 now, and they don't have it cured, and they never will. And you know why? Because it's a cash cow. They make $2 billion a year selling products to diabetics. And I know because they sell a lot to me. I have the Dexcom. Those cost $800 for a 3-month supply. I have an insulin pump, and the pump supplies cost a couple $1,000 for a 3-month supply. My insulin, I just picked up insulin the other day. I have a 3-month supply, and it costs $800 and some. So why would you kill a cash cow? They don't. It's the same thing with cancers. I'm sure that if cancer wasn't a cash cow, they'd have it cured too. Maybe in the future when we get to space and whatever, and we have all those neat little gadgets that they had on Star Trek, then maybe they will have cured all these different diseases. But right now, that's not happening. Not going to happen either, because the pharmaceutical companies need a cash cow, So I hope that clears up some of that. My older sister, who had gestational diabetic, was a gestational diabetic. 2 years after she had gestational diabetes, she was a full-blown diabetic, and she was on insulin, and she was considered a juvenile diabetic because she was 37. So you can't say that it doesn't run in families, because it does. Just like I said with my husband, they all have taken metformin except his younger sister, who is a juvenile diabetic, And her diabetes presented after she had a heart attack at the age of 38. So there's a lot of things that go untreated. Her diabetes was untreated. Her blood sugar was in the 400s. She chooses not to take care of her diabetes. Her sugars are always high, always. And it'll kill her because she doesn't take care of herself. Just like it killed my older sister because she didn't take care of herself either. She thought that if she ate a piece of cake, she could take extra insulin and that would cover it. But she didn't know how many carbs she was eating. She didn't know how much insulin to compensate for what she was eating that wasn't in her diet. That's why when she passed away, her sugar was over 1,500. Have no idea what she ate, but her sugar was over 1,500. Caused her to have a massive heart attack. Not one, but two. When she had the second one, they managed to get her sugar down to 800. But she still had a second heart attack, and she didn't make the second one. So I've been around 68 years. I've never been controlled. I take really good care of myself. I eat right. Except here lately, I haven't been eating right. And that's on me. It's not that I haven't been eating right, it's just that I haven't been eating. And that's not good either. But if you want to stay around as long as I have, stick to a diet. Exercise. I exercise. I do Tai Chi. I've gotten to the point now where I do Tai Chi sitting because my balance is way off and I have a tendency to tip over, which I've tipped over several times. And last time I tipped over on Easter, I broke my hip. So I do my Tai Chi exercises sitting. So sit and do your exercises, but don't stop. I exercise every day. And it is what it is. But you need to understand that you need to take care of your diabetes if you're going to be a diabetic and you're going to live very long. I know a lot of people that don't care whether they live long or not, and they don't take care of anything. So, but like I said, one of the best things you can do is go and get genetically tested if diabetes runs in your family. Forewarned is forearmed, because if you know that diabetes runs in your family and you go and get the genetic testing for it and everything else that's out there, you can change your diet. You can change your habits. The longer that you can maintain a healthy way of living, the longer it is before you become a diabetic. That's all I can say. And if it was me, I would do it just so I could cheat the pharmaceutical companies out of a lot of sales. And on that note, I'm going to close today.